Coach. Let's find out if you're ready for love. Here's your marvelous host, Nikki Lee.
Hello, and welcome to Ready for Love Radio. This is your host and love coach, Nikki Lee. Now, last week, we had kind of a deep conversation, more serious than usual, and we were talking to Tanya Diamond about the fact that sometimes in this field, there are practitioners who overstep the bounds and exceed the boundaries and act inappropriately and may abuse their clients in various ways. And we also talked about male rape, which I've been wanting to cover that for quite a while. And during the part about practitioners, we also talked about codes of ethics and how practitioners should have a code of ethics. And I got to thinking about it right after the show finished up, and I said, it would really be a good follow-up to talk about code of ethics in more detail, just to make sure the listeners understand what it is, how it works for them. And so I said, you know what, I know the perfect person to bring on with me that has worked extensively with code of ethics and putting those together. And people who've listened to me very often are going to know this person well because he's been on with me many times in the past. And I'm very happy to have my friend Paul Bagge back with me. Paul, awesome to have you with me.
Thank you. It's always great to be here with you.
It's been way too long since you were here last, but it's awesome to have you back.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And you are Mr. Code of Ethics, so you're the one I had to have on with me tonight.
Well, that makes perfect sense to me.
So, quick little bio for people that I can't imagine, but people that may not know you. Paul Tantra Viking Bagge is a sex and intimacy coach for the last 25-plus years. He's a sexual energy healer and author of, now you're going to see why I invited him, the Tantra Vikings Code of Ethics for Sexual Energy Workers. So, now why when I say that you are Mr. Code of Ethics?
Well, I wrote this Code of Ethics not just for me. I wrote it for basically everybody who does this type of work. I'm writing my own Code of Ethics so everybody can see it. They know what I stand for, know where my values are at. That was part of it. But I also wanted to put something together that other people could use as well, because when I first started this whole journey of sexual energy and doing sexual energy work, I found that the women who were coming to me had already been abused by other practitioners. For some reason, I was getting these people. And I was like, okay, nobody's adhering to a code of ethics, or nobody is doing what they're supposed to be doing as far as helping these people and keeping them safe. So I wrote this so that other people could use it as well.
Wow, that's sad. It seems to me, and maybe I'm being Pollyannish about this, but the most important part of our job as coaches or energy workers or whatever we're doing in this field is, we're dealing with people on the most personal, intimate level possible. Whether it's the work that you're doing hands-on or whether it's the work I'm doing discussing their personal, intimate life with them, and they're trusting us with their innermost thoughts and their body and this kind of thing. And I can't fathom violating that trust and vulnerability. I can't imagine doing that to somebody, And in the stories I've heard in the last few weeks, I'm disgusted and horrified with the things I've heard. That's the reason I'm doing these couple of shows back to back. I couldn't not do this. There are times when I do a show, and it's something I have to do. It's one of those. If I can help one person not have to deal with this kind of situation, the show's got to be done. Kind of situation at this point.
Right, you're compelled to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen comments from people. I've heard stories from people, and it's like all of a sudden I'm seeing more and more posts on Facebook from people about this kind of thing all of a sudden. And I can't believe some of the things that I'm seeing people say about this topic. Yeah, I'm floored.
It really all started a while back with the Me Too movement. Well, when that became a part of this industry, things were being exposed. People were being exposed for the behavior that goes on in the industry as far as like what practitioners do to abuse clients. And I even read some stories about in schools where the abuse is rampant there as well. So, I mean, it starts at the very top level and it's all the way down to the roots as well.
Yeah, I didn't mention that last week about several schools that just consistently the people they're turning out have issues. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, essentially, okay. In most states, this kind of work is illegal. If you touch somebody's genitals and you get paid money, you don't have an MD after your name, technically it's prostitution. So There is no governing body. There is no board of ethics. There's nobody checking in on people to see how they're running their business, and there's nobody to report this stuff to as far as like an agency other than a police. And then, that just causes usually it ends up causing a little bit more grief for the person doing the reporting. I mean, if there's like an oversight board or something, that's one thing. Once you go to the police, that's something totally different altogether. But there is no oversight board for any sexual energy work, for tantra practitioners, for anybody in anything to do with sexual energy.
Right.
The huge part of the problem is you can't put anything together, some type of an oversight board or anything like that, if the industry itself is, working outside of the law. Nobody wants to get involved in it.
Right. Well, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
It's such a shame because the sexual energy field just fascinates me to absolutely no end. It really does. I've had quite a few people on here and we've talked about it and the work and the good it can do, and especially for people that are trying to heal from trauma. Oh wow. The things I've heard from people as far as successes and what's been done, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing what's been done.
Well, that's what makes these reports of this abuse even more heinous. Because, because this is such a fringe type of healing modality, and because there is a certain amount of risk with the law going on there too, oftentimes these people have tried everything else on the planet to heal. And this is a last-ditch effort to go to somebody like this, and then you're bearing your soul to them. You are putting yourself in the most vulnerable position you can. Especially, let's just say, for instance, you're going to a male practitioner and you're trying to get past sexual trauma that happened to you earlier in your life that was caused by a male. So you're going to another male and trusting him with absolutely everything. And then that person's going to turn around and violate you? That's disgusting.
Right. I completely agree. Do you think one of the things in the beginning is when a person goes into this, and this is more on the practitioner level, but the person's got to look at their motives for getting into this field?
Oh, yeah. There is a huge amount of self-analysis that needs to go in to decide whether or not you're ready for this type of work, decide what your actual scope of practice is going to be, and where your boundaries are. I mean, if you're somebody who's coming from sexual wounding and you haven't worked through it, then you really don't have any right to be out there and working with people who are placing so much trust in you and making themselves so vulnerable. There's too many things in the human psyche that can go on that, it's not a good scenario. The practitioner has to be in the right place for their client, and that's body, mind, and soul. They have to be there 100%.
Well, and I mean, even from the things you and I have talked about, if a person is working with you and they're working through trauma, and there's a trigger, and they're dealing with trauma and you reach them on such a deep level, they need you to be 100% present with them. And if the practitioner happens to be triggered at the same time, I can't even imagine what would happen. I mean, because the practitioner just seriously couldn't be there for them, right?
No, absolutely not. Yeah, again, I mean, this is, a lot of this stuff really is common sense when you think about it, but for some reason it gets overlooked. Yeah. You have to be 100% present. Your client, okay, and you and I have discussed this before, in this type of sexual energy work, there's a certain altered state of consciousness that takes effect when you're super aroused via your hormones. Your dopamine, your oxytocin levels all rise. And for all intents and purposes, at that point, you cannot make a rational decision. You cannot. Right. I don't care what anybody wants to say, yeah, I'm in control of everything. No, you're being influenced in some way, shape, or form. So it is up to the practitioner to hold their client's best interest, their everything, 100% above their own. I mean, if they're not doing that to begin with, they shouldn't be doing that work. But I mean, this is a sacred thing that this type of work and that these clients are looking for. Your ethics in this field have to be beyond reproach. I can't think of really any other profession where people are this vulnerable in front of you, where people come to you, for all intent, again, for lack of a better word, this time, people come to you damaged, and they are looking for some type of solace, some types of healing, something that they haven't been able to find anywhere else. And, modern medicine, you got 1,000 different doctors to choose from, 1,000 different insurance companies to choose from. You can go 1,000 different directions with all of that. This is the only route for some people to take because they've tried everything else.
Exactly. Well, I know some of what we're saying is scaring people. I know that. And I think part of my idea with this is I want to scare them into understanding they can do this safely, but they really, really, really need to listen to what we're telling them because we've got their best interest at heart, and we know what they need to know, and we're sharing it with them. Right.
So to begin with, every practitioner should have their code of ethics posted somewhere, whether it be in their office, on their website, wherever it is that you're finding them. You should be able to find their code of ethics. If they don't have something out there in public saying this is who I am, what I do, and my belief system around it, that's a huge red flag. That should be 100% clear even before you start talking to this person. That's number one. Number two, you kind of have to be your own best advocate, like you should be for anything, in any type of health care or anything that has to do with your body, mind, or soul. You have to do a little legwork here and, look for references. You have to also go with what your gut is telling you about this whole thing as well.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to take into consideration here. And a lot of, again, because this sometimes is the last-ditch effort, sometimes the potential client is scared to come to this work because of all the stigma that's involved around it. But if you can be your own best advocate, do the legwork and checking these people out, then you can take some of that with you to feel more secure about who you're going to see.
When I have people call me about, they're looking for a coach, what I do is, what I tell them is, as far as I'm concerned, our meeting the first time is for both of us to see if it's a fit. Just because I do the work and I'm trained doesn't mean we're definitely going to be a fit. I want to make sure that what they need is something that I feel confident I can do for them and I can give them what they need from me. And in return, they need to make sure that I'm a fit for them. Is my style right for them? It's not that we're necessarily going to be a fit for each other. What's kind of interesting is when it's a husband and wife that we meet, and I'm a fit for one and I'm the other. That's always fun. You know?
Yeah, split it up. Well, yeah, and you know, I personally, I offer a free initial consultation just for that reason. We discuss what's going on, why they think they need this type of work. I discuss what this type of work consists of. I also, under my own code, I don't believe in taking anybody's money till I already have like a plan in place to actually help them. That's just me. But, you know, that's part of it too. But at that point, when they tell me what it is they're searching for, I make the decision whether or not based on my training, whether I can help them. There's been many people that I've turned away and said, no, I actually think you might need to go talk to a psychiatrist first before you come talk to me. That, you know, there's a lot of things that can be worked out there before you come to this route. Now, this type of healing, when done by a trained, well-intentioned practitioner, is amazing. It has amazing benefits. This works on body, mind, and soul all together at once, rather than, you know, going to an MD to work on the physical part, going to a psychologist to work on the mental part, going to somebody else for the spiritual part. This works all at the same time. So it's a tremendously helpful and healing modality. It just has to be done by the right person.
One of the things, too, that we talked about that needs to be done before the hands-on body work needs to be done, and something to kind of get the person maybe in the right mindset, would include understanding boundaries. And anybody that listens to this show more than about twice knows I'm a huge proponent of understanding boundaries and setting boundaries for ourselves. And once you set those boundaries, sticking to them for yourself.
Right.
Now, because I figure if we don't stick up for our own boundaries, why should anybody else? You know, if we don't care enough for ourselves to enforce those boundaries, you know, why is anybody else going to do it? So how does the conversation of boundaries apply in this scenario?
Oh, applies in 1,000 different ways, actually. Depends on who you're going to see and what their scope of practice is. And let's also split this up into another category, too. There's sexual healing work, and then there's sex work. Two totally different things, but sometimes get blended together and blurred. If you're going to somebody and you're going for sexual healing, this person should be touching you with pretty much their hands, and that's it. You know, they should not be naked. I know a lot of practitioners think that's a part of it for some reason. I don't. For me, it's about the person on the table. My nudity or lack thereof, or not nudity, that has nothing to do with it. It's about the person on the table.
Right.
You could all ask this person how it is, you know, this potential healer for you. Ask them how they go about their sessions. You know, number one, do you keep your clothes on? Number two, what are you going to be touching me with? You know, if I have a problem during a session, can I stop the session? Personally, in my sessions, I reserve the right, along with the client, to stop the session at any time if I feel my boundaries are being violated, or they're pushing them. You know, I'm in control at that point, and I'm in control through the whole session. So this falls on me, not so much the client. But it is a good idea for the client to educate themselves and let their boundaries be known. Another thing, for instance, is that when I give a massage, I massage front to back, head to toe. But I tell these people, I will massage every millimeter of flesh you have, unless you tell me right now there's something you don't want touched. And if you don't, then I have no problem with that. Absolutely no problem. Again, these people are putting themselves in a very vulnerable position, and they need to feel safe for number one, for their own mental well-being, but number two, for this work to actually work. I mean, if the client's sitting there all nervous, doesn't know what's going on, well, then chances are you're not going to have a successful session.
True.
Yeah.
Quick question. How would a client cross your boundaries?
Okay, there's been a couple of clients that have reached out and tried to, grope me during a session. I've stopped the session right there. I've said I'm sorry, but we can't do this. This is not in either one of our best interests, and it's not safe. I sit there and I talk to them for a couple of minutes, ask them if they think they can get through the session without doing that, and give them another chance. If it doesn't work, then that's it. They're off the table, and we don't work together anymore. I do give them that one chance because, like I said, you're in an altered state, so it can be easy for this person to get a little lost, at that moment. But if you can't, talk to them and say to them, okay, that's not appropriate, we won't do that, and have it continue in that way, then you shouldn't be working together.
Right. Well, talking about it beforehand and then talking about it in the moment would be kind of a different situation, I would think.
Right. And then I've had clients who, because everybody, once I'm done working with them, they get my home cell phone number, and 24/7 for the next 2 weeks, I am available to them, because oftentimes energy work doesn't produce results right away. It can take 2, 3, 4 days for the stuff to work through the system. But I've had a couple of women start calling me at 2 o'clock in the morning, just, wanting to talk and be very social and to start flirting with me. No, we have a professional relationship. If you're not calling me for something in regards to that relationship or the work we're doing, then I cannot work with you. We cannot do this.
And it came up on one of the conversations online the other day. How do we define a client? Because being involved with a client I think should be against everybody's code of ethics. So how do we define a client? Because in the world of social media and Facebook Live and all this kind of thing, it's important, if you're going to say in a code of ethics you're not involved with clients, how do we define a client?
Okay. Well, the first and easiest answer is a client is somebody who's paying you. Okay, that's the easy one. A client is also somebody who is still taking your advice, your opinion, still following some type of treatment that with you, whether there's money exchanging hands or not, at that point, they're still trusting you for their treatment. They are still a client. And even after the fact, after these treatments are done, every school of medicine, every school of any type of alternative therapy, they all teach ethics. In the ethics classes, they teach about dating your clients, because some people think that's okay. I went to massage school, and the school I went to, they told us a year. Once you had discharged being a client from your service for a year, then you can start thinking about seeing them if there was somebody, that you were attracted to. The idea behind that time frame is also because of transference and countertransference. Transference being the person on the table that you're working with sees you as something other than what you are, something other than a practitioner. They see you as a love interest, or they have feelings for you in some way, shape, or form other than what's going on right there in the office. Actually, that whole scenario plays out perfectly when it used to be the women falling in love with their obstetricians. That's a form of transference. Countertransference is when the practitioner sees something in the client that's not part of the session, or that's not part of the treatment. Like maybe the woman on the table reminds me of my ex-girlfriend, and I'm still attracted to her. That's countertransference. But the idea behind the time limit is to make sure that none of that is in place, that what you're feeling for the person is because that's who they are, not because of the work that you've done together.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So anybody that's, quote unquote, under your care.
Yeah, and that even if they're still under your care after you've paid, after the whole money exchange is done, still under your care, yes.
Okay. All right. Like I said, I kept seeing that come up yesterday as far as clients, so I figured defining what a client would be important.
It's kind of, you brought me back to that. I remember in massage school, when we were talking about this whole thing, there was this woman who was a student. She was like 45 years old, and we talked about this very thing. And she stood up. She's like, oh, no. If I meet a man and I like him, I'm going to date him. And the teacher was like, no, you're not. You cannot do that. And she was adamant about it, and I don't remember if she got suspended or she was actually kicked out of the school, but it wasn't going to fly. There's no way you're going to pass your ethics class if that's your attitude.
Yeah, I actually ended up getting a bunch of massage sessions because a massage therapist had a crush on somebody, and he bought a bunch of massage sessions with her, and then they decided that she shouldn't be working on him. I'm like, oh, shucks.
And this is actually an especially dangerous field, body work, for that type of work to happen, because again, you're dealing with all those feel-good chemicals that make you say, hey, I like this person. But also, sometimes, and this is in the case of a male practitioner and a female client, you are the first nurturing male that this woman has ever come across. You're giving her something that she's never gotten from any other man. You're listening to her. You're caring about her. You're not asking for anything from her. You're there 100% for her. Sometimes that's enough. Just that is enough for them to start developing feelings for you, because it's something they've never experienced before.
Right. Makes sense. Yeah. All right. Okay, so I'll tell you what, in order to give direct examples to the listeners, let's go through some of your ethics just to tell them exactly what we're talking about. What do you think?
Okay, let's do that.
Because I happen to copy them off your website, so I've got them. I found them. It didn't take a whole lot of work to find them, so this is good.
No, I put it right out there for everybody to find.
I had always felt that the people doing the hands-on work were the ones that need code of ethics when I started all this. And then the more I started seeing comments and all this kind of stuff, I'm like, you know what, all of us need these. So I'm putting together my code of ethics now, and I will have them up on my website this week. So, actually, both my websites. So I'm putting mine together now, everybody. So
there you go.
Hopefully by the end of the week it'll be up. Okay, so let's see. First one. And while I'm thinking about that, a couple of the neat ideas I saw were on your website, in your office, and some of the people I saw too put it in their introductory package that they hand out to clients when they come in. Like your intake paperwork. They also put the code of ethics in there, and then they both initial it along with the other paperwork that they have the person do. So they both acknowledge it. I like that idea.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I like that. Okay, so the first one, to be and remain grounded during the entire session. I like that. You want to explain that to us?
Yeah, again, this is about the person on the table. It's not about the practitioner. So the practitioner shouldn't be bringing in anything from his life, his day, into the session. The practitioner needs to remain grounded and focused on the client at all times. Be 100% present for the client at all times. That's what they come to you for. If you're working on them and you're worried about your kid getting out of school, you're worried about a bill you got to pay, you're worried about taxes, whatever, you're not going to be there 100% for your client. So that's what that is. Remaining grounded for the entire session.
Exactly. Well, it's their time. They paid for it. They need your attention. Here again, common sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Common sense, not as common as we like to think. So.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not.
Number 2, I love number 2. To make and provide the client a healthy and safe environment.
Yes. Now, this covers a few different things. Okay. So, back to sexual energy again, this is what it is. So your client, most times, could be completely naked. So basic health, what's the word I'm looking for? Hygiene should be thought of. The client should also be made to feel safe, knowing that nothing is going to get in the way of their session, that you're with them there 100% of whatever time they're paying for. They should also be guaranteed confidentiality and discretion. Again, I jokingly say I hold the secrets of thousands of women in my head, but it's true. On the table, these women tell me things they've never told their best friend. So, that type of safety has to be taken into account, too, that they need to feel whatever happens in that session is safe being there. The other thing is that being the rock for the client, because the client, again, in those altered states of consciousness, cannot make rational decisions for themselves. So it is up to the practitioner to maintain the boundaries, to maintain everything that goes along with that session for the client. Once again, it's common sense, but yeah.
Okay, how about be sure the client has a firm understanding of what will happen during the session. I think that's got to be so important for that trust to be in place before the session starts. I would want to know for sure.
Yeah, well, it does, and and some of that goes back to what you were just talking about with having a client, assign or initial the code of ethics, making sure they understand. But again, if you're having an initial consultation with somebody, you usually lay that out for them then, and then you lay it out for again when they come and see you. This is what's going to take place today. And do you have any objections to it, or is there anything that you have any questions? Is there anything you need to know beforehand? I always tell my clients, and I tell them this when I first talk to them, I say, you're going to hear this from me at least 3 different times before you get on the table. I said, if you feel weird, if you feel uncomfortable, if something I'm doing makes you feel a little jittery, anything, tell me. Do not, just for the sake of the session, go through the session. Because sometimes people get scared and they're going, I don't want to say anything, I just want to let him do his thing. No. Say something. The last thing I want is somebody walking out my door, closing the door, walking back to their car saying, all right, what the hell just happened? That's not what I wanted. That's not what I was expecting. Everything needs to be agreed upon beforehand, and then, again, I'm going to say this one more time, because of that altered state of consciousness, it pretty much has to stay as the way it was planned before the session. There are certain times when something will come up during a session that needs to be dealt with that wasn't, thought about beforehand, like memories, triggers, things like that. Fine. They need to be dealt with then. But what I tell the client is, please, say something. And when you say something, first thing that's going to happen automatically is my hands are going to come off you. I'm going to ask you what's going on. We're going to talk about it right then. If it's something we can work through and move past at that moment, we will. If not, we end the session right there. No problem, no harm, no foul. This is about the client and their safety, and yeah, it's just that simple.
Well, I like, too, that you explain to them what's going to happen and say, is there any part of this you're not comfortable with beforehand? And then right. I'm sure that, as many people as you've worked on and as much as you do this, I'm sure, too, that if the person were to tense up, and I'm guessing certain areas, when you touch it, you're going to think, okay, if they're going to tense up, this is where it's going to happen. If you sense that, you probably ask them if they're okay and that kind of thing, just to make sure that they are okay in the moment. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, that goes back to being present and being there for your client. You're watching their breath, you're watching their how they move, you're watching their reactions to certain things. You can tell when something bothers somebody. You can tell if something is making them uncomfortable. If you've been doing it long enough, you can read all these things, and again, it's your responsibility as the practitioner to make sure all this stuff is above board and everything that's happening has already been agreed upon, and that everything that is happening is in the client's 100% best interest.
Well, see, that's the difference in having a practitioner who cares about the client and one that is just in it for themselves. If you truly care about the client, you want them to have the best possible experience so that when they leave, they've benefited from the work. Right?
Yeah. Yes. 100%.
Okay. That would be the goal. So, okay. Let me see. Next one, to always inform the client of any possible side effects of the session before it begins.
Yes.
So,
okay. Now, this one is a little bit more tricky because you don't always know what will happen in a session when you start digging up traumas and past memories. But you do have a good idea. Based on your experience, based on your training, you know what can come about. So you try to educate your client as best as you can. This is what we're going to do, and oftentimes this is what happens. You can even take that further and say, okay, so if this does happen, is it okay if we do this? Just to prepare the client. And like I said, too, in energy work, you don't always see results right away. Sometimes it's after the fact. That's why aftercare is so damn important in this business as well. But a lot of times that's neglected by practitioners. I call you the next day, everything go great, good, write me a testimonial, done. I'll never talk to you again. No. This is because of the intimacy in this work, because of the things that can come up. I mean, there's deep, dark places that this type of work goes to in order to heal. Sometimes people are digging up traumas they don't even remember. And once they do remember them because you brought it to the surface, they don't know what the hell to do with them. So at that point, the practitioner needs to take over. Now, I'm assuming, we're talking here, and I'm generalizing. I'm assuming the practitioners we're talking about do have trauma training. If you don't have trauma training, you shouldn't be doing what? Well, you're going to be digging up trauma. That's
right.
Plain and simple, black and white. There is no gray area there.
Right.
Yeah.
We talked about that there are practitioners out there who put it out there like they do have trauma training, but they don't.
Yeah, it's scary. That part of it is scary. So you do have to check out. Any prospective client needs to check out their practitioner. Ask for references. Here's something they could ask, because when I did have a girlfriend at the time, I used to make her available. Of course, she agreed to it, but I used to make her available to my clients to sit in the room. If they felt more comfortable having a female in the room with them, no problem. I had somebody there to take care of that. So, the client, the potential client, could ask, is it okay if I bring a friend to hold space for me just like you're doing? Is it okay if I have somebody with me? It would make me feel better. If you're going to a reputable, above-board practitioner, shouldn't have a problem with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, we brought that up last week, too. If they've got policies that just seem unreasonable, that should be a red flag. If they're not willing to work with you, that's a red flag, so.
Yeah, that's definitely a red flag.
Make sure the client understands you're able to stop the session at any time they feel uncomfortable with the work being done and don't understand what's being done.
Yeah, that goes back to my thing of, please don't, for the sake of going through with it, just go through with it. So you make sure the client understands that, but the client is also putting a whole hell of a lot of faith and trust in you that, if you pick up on something that they don't, that you're going to act in their best interest and you'll stop the session.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, something I've had so many guests point out recently is that women so often don't speak up because they're afraid of disappointing somebody. They know they should, their gut's telling them they should, but they're like, oh, I'm going to disappoint the person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't
ever do that.
Yeah. In this kind of situation, don't worry about that. If your gut's telling you you're uncomfortable or something's not right, speak up for yourself. Like we said before, be your own advocate. You gotta speak up for yourself.
Oh yeah.
And if the practitioner doesn't allow you to do that, go to somebody else. Get off the table.
Yeah, don't worry about disappointing somebody, and also don't worry about disappointing yourself. If it's something that you had to work your courage up to get through and to get to go make the appointment, and you're like, oh, I'm going to work on it this time, I'm going to work on this time, I'm going to do it. If it doesn't feel right, if your gut is telling you not to do it, listen to your gut. Your gut is big brother. It's looking out for you.
Yeah. Well, you may just not be ready. That's fine if you're not. If you're not ready.
Absolutely. I mean, this work is not for everybody. Definitely not. There's definitely some people who should not be on the table getting that type of work because they haven't dealt with their stuff enough. They haven't really taken the time to inform themselves or educate themselves as to what the session will be all about or what could come from it, as far as digging up traumas and things like that. Oh yeah, there's definitely people who come to me and they're not ready, and I turn them away because it's not in their best interest. Yeah.
Well, I know I would love to have one of these sessions because there's some things I really need to work through. But 15 years ago, I could not have done this. 10 years ago, I couldn't have done this. I know I couldn't have handled it. So you've got to be in the right space to handle it. I'm not sure I could have 7 or 8 years ago. I feel I could now with a person I trusted, But right. you got to be in the right space to handle it. And if you think you are, but you get there and the session starts and you realize you're not, or you realize that the practitioner is just not the right fit for you, speak up for yourself.
Right there.
Stop it. Exactly. That's what you do.
Yeah. Because if you're not ready for this work, you can traumatize yourself even more.
Exactly. And it's much better to wait, learn some more, work some more, and just wait until you're ready. Don't rush it. You're going to do more harm than good if you do.
Right. And if the therapist that you just went to talk to, or practitioner, or whatever term we want to use, if they are any type of a caring practitioner, they might offer you counseling first before you get on the table. Or they might refer you to somebody that can help you, and then you can work into that next phase. If that person truly cares about you, they're going to offer you something that will help. Even if it's just as simple as, I think you should read this book first. Whatever. They should be offering you something.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see. Oh, here we go. To realize that the work being done may result in the client being in an altered mental capacity and to never take advantage of the situation. That's
I expanded that one. I put bullet points around that one. I think that's probably the biggest problem with the rampant abuse that goes on. I mean, number one, you get predators, but this is how they take advantage of the clients. They wait till you're in that semi-euphoric state to again, ask you things that you cannot give a rational answer to. And I know I heard your show last week, and Tanya gave a perfect description of how it happens. They'll say things like, "Oh, you're an advanced student. I think we can now move to this level." And all of a sudden, you're doing things you never planned on doing, and that's not why you came there. And it's not till you walk out the door and say, "What the hell just happened?" Well, at that point, it's too late. But right. that is when a lot of these practitioners do take advantage of their clients. Start telling them everything they know they want to hear, and they're in it for themselves, and they take advantage of the clients. And in my mind, we're doing the most sacred work there is. And I've stated it many times that it's an honor and a privilege to be able to work with people in this way, because I know how much trust they're putting into me. I know through all my experience with my clients how vulnerable they are, how damaged they are. I know all of this. This is the most sacred work there is. So to me, taking advantage of that is about the most heinous thing there is. To go out and present yourself as being this, forthright person who can do this type of work, which there's only really, as far as I know, and this is what I've been told by women, there's only like a handful of reputable men doing this work on the East Coast of this country. I actually don't know the rest of them personally. I think the number is even lower. And I don't say that to scare people. I just want the women who go out there looking for these services to be aware that they really, really need to check into these people.
Right.
I guarantee all my clients' discretion and confidentiality, but I have a couple clients who have told me, if you ever need a reference, I'll be happy to talk about it. Ask these people, do they have references? Is there possibly somebody you could talk to?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't go to any medical person without getting references first, and from somebody I know. So
here's the thing too, because this particular modality does work on the outside of the law a bit. Oftentimes that question won't get asked because people are afraid. Oh, what can I ask? What should I ask? What should I say? I don't want to offend this guy. Whatever. No, you're your own advocate. Ask the questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to do it. Like I said, you have to stand up for yourself.
Nobody else is going to do it for you. And there's plenty of people out there who will take advantage of you if you don't. It's a sad truth, but especially in this field, modality, industry, whatever you want to call it, the predators are out there, and you need to be vigilant and your own best educator, your own best advocate, your own everything before you go see somebody. And that's male or female. Male or female. It makes no difference what the gender is of the practitioner. You need to check on them.
That's it. Well, that's why I'm spending a couple different weeks talking about this, because I really want to drive the point home, and I really want to share the information. So
it's really needed. So thank you.
Let me see. All right. To always act in accordance with the client's best interest. Here again, that ought to be common sense, but
that kind of, I stuck it out there by itself, but it kind of goes along with a few other things we've covered, about being present, and it's 100% about the clients. If to realize that, they may not be able to ask the questions or stop the session at a certain moment, but it's up to you to keep that safety as the practitioner, to watch them, to stay present, to make sure that they're okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the last one works in perfectly with that. Oh, it's not the last one. Okay. The next one says, always keep the client's mental, physical, and spiritual health as guidelines during a session. Okay, that really means you have to be present to keep all that going and keep all that in mind.
It does. It absolutely does. And again, my opinion, we're doing the most sacred work there is. So that should definitely be a requirement. But this actually covers a couple of other things, too. You have to take into consideration what the client was like before they walked in the door. Did they have a bad day? Is there stuff going on at home that they could be bringing into the session? The practitioner wants to take all of that into account, too. They also, I hope, they would have asked a bunch of fundamental questions about the client's health, what they can handle, what they can't handle, what type of medications they're on. Again, all these things should be common sense. So you have to take all of this into consideration. And you have to take into consideration, how they might, their home life, too. I've had a lot of husbands over the year really mad at me because their wives didn't tell them, till after the fact. Oh, I went to go see this guy and I worked on this. If your client is married, something to take into consideration is, okay, there's somebody at the other end of this wedding ring, and do they know this client's here? How are they going to react to it? Is this person going to get off my table and start suddenly feeling incredibly guilty because of their spouse? These are all weird little things, but they're things that need to be taken into consideration. It's about the overall. The session doesn't just take place on the table. It takes place before, during, and after.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I like this next one. To not change the scope of the session without the client's consent at any time. Now, that's interesting because things can happen during the session, especially if you're treating trauma and you trigger something unexpectedly, and I mean, you may have to definitely change the scope of the session. So this is interesting.
Well, again, and that's, the explanations beforehand where you educate the client. This is what could happen. And if this does happen, we could go this route. Or, is it okay if I do this? The practitioner, based on what he knows of his client, based on his experience, should have some idea of what could go on in that session. So, I mean, that should already be laid out there, that some of these things are possibilities. And again, this also goes back to this is where the clients take advantage. I mean, the practitioners take advantage and wait till they're in that altered state and say, okay, now that we're here, let's move on to this. Let's move on to, sticking my penis inside you because this is what I think you need. That is changing the scope of the session if that's not what you came into there for. So, I mean, that I would think should be self-explanatory, but sometimes I guess it's not. Yeah.
The things that aren't self-explanatory to some people just floor me, but that's a whole other topic.
Right.
Let me see. Reserve the right to end the session and act upon it if ever the client or my health or boundaries are about to become in jeopardy.
Yep, that goes back to the clients touching me when they're not supposed to. If the client isn't comfortable with my touch, they feel like they're being threatened in some way, they should be able to say, sit right up off the table, say, no, I'm not doing this, and that should be fine.
Right.
I think it's funny that I have to go over them. But every time I do, and it's like, yep, I can understand where somebody can take advantage of this. Yep, I can understand where somebody take advantage of this. So it is important to go over them and expand on them as well.
Well, and the next one is definitely self-explanatory. I would think to always, to the best of my ability, provide the client with the services for which they are paying. I think that's obvious.
It is. It is completely obvious. But, again, these things get violated. Okay, this is not something that's going to be covered by insurance. So clients are going to be paying, don't put it on their credit card, paying cash, doing whatever. They are generally paying you a lot of money. These sessions aren't cheap, and they expect and deserve what they pay for.
Right.
It's really that simple. But, and it happens in other professions. You go see somebody for 45 minutes, they charge you for an hour, or, they're not feeling their best that day, so they don't put 100% effort into their sessions. In this industry, that is bullshit. You are, again, working with people incredibly vulnerable, trusting you with everything. They deserve every freaking penny's worth. I don't care what your day is like. I don't care if you get a cold. If you get a cold and you don't think you can make it through a whole session, cancel the session. Whatever it takes. You need to be there 100% of the time for your client. That's what they're paying for.
Yeah, I used to get into that with our massage therapist sometimes when she's like, I don't feel good. I said, well, then you need to reschedule or you need to get it together, one of the two. So, yep.
Yeah.
You're not going to do body work and be half-assed about it. It's not going to happen. So she just looked at me funny. I said, did you hear me? So you're not working with my clients.
Right.
No. Let me see. Provide the client with sufficient aftercare. And I like your note in parentheses. The aftercare of the client can be just as important as the session itself. Often the full effects of the session cannot be felt till days later. And especially, I would think, with trauma work, that's very true. Is that also true with other? Is that also true with other work that you do too?
Oh yeah, well, any type of energy work doesn't come out right away. Sometimes it can. You've had a Reiki session, right?
I have. I loved it.
Okay. Sometimes you feel the effects of that right away, right where you're on the table. Sometimes it's not till like later the next day you feel lighter or like you released something or something like that. Well, especially in sexual energy work, if you're doing work that involves stimulating for release of an energetic block. Okay? Mm-hmm. Sometimes that comes out right away. Other times it can take up to 2 weeks for this stuff to come out. I tell my clients, if you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and you start bawling your eyes out, you don't know why, you're going to pick up the phone and you're going to call me. I don't care it's 2 o'clock in the morning. 99.9% of the time, it's due to the work we did. You know, anything that happens emotionally, shit, even physically, if things start going on out of the ordinary a week after the session, it could go back to the session. So that is still falls on the responsibility of the practitioner. Aftercare, like I stated, can be even more important than the actual session itself, because you're right there with them in session, but then they leave and they don't have you anymore. They need to know that they can get a hold of you, that you will be there for them, that is already paid for. It's not an extra. It comes with the package, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, otherwise, if this kind of stuff starts happening, they have no idea what's going on with them. So.
Exactly, and that's it. I'm like, I don't care what it is. If it's something out of the ordinary, call me, because chances are it might have something to do with the session. If it doesn't, I mean, you explain to me what's going on, and I'll tell you if it came from the session or if it's something else, and I'll try to help you with that. If it's something I can help, if not, then you know, I might refer you out to somebody else if it's something psychological or something else that they can help you with it. But either way, you need to be there for the client to figure that out.
Right.
Yeah.
Follow-up sounds good to me. I need you to explain it to a doctor or two of mine. So, let me see. And we've only got a couple of minutes left, but how about always try to teach and educate the client about their bodies and the process that brought them to a session? Okay.
Well, because this is like going to see anybody for anything. If you're going to fix something, you want to make sure it's fixed and it's not going to come back. So you want to educate them about how they got to be wherever they are, educate them about what you're doing, and then educate them about what you know is going to happen. Sometimes I have clients who will just go for the sex work end of it, and they're coming to me because they've never experienced a vaginal orgasm, or they've never experienced ejaculation or something like this. I educate them about their bodies so they understand the processes of what is going on with them. And then there can be a certain point where they don't need me anymore, that they can take care of themselves to some extent, or whatever example we want to use. But yeah, education is key in all of it. A lot of times people really don't have any idea how their bodies actually work. Sad to say, but it's true. We don't get a whole lot of education in school as far as how our sexual anatomy works. They talk about diseases we can get, teach you how to put on a condom, teach you about reproduction, but they don't teach you about pleasure. They don't teach you about sensitivity or stimulation or anything like that. You know, that's something you got to go, if you want to know as an adult, you got to go find that education yourself. So that's part of the job as well.
Awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, I think we have covered, given listeners a whole lot of information to think about. And since we did, I tell you what, I am also going to post part of your code of ethics along with the website link for people if they want to take a look at the full content. And I'm also going to post the archive of the show. I'll also include the link to last week's show. And it's going to be on my website at www.readyforloveradio.com/code-of-ethics. So, Paul, thanks a lot for being here and going over this with me. Because like I said, you were the person I thought of immediately. I said, Paul's got to do this with me. He's the one.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I hope everybody got lots of good information. Feel free to share the link to the show with friends that you think can benefit from it, as always. And listeners, I'll be with you next time on Ready for Love Radio.